the Bethlehem who led them from Persia to Bethlehem, seeking the one who was King of the Jews. Throughout our Christmas season and Advent season, and whenever people decide that they're going to put it up, what do we see on lawns and where the cities allow it? We see the creche, don't we? I mean, we have a creche sitting out here. It was kind of interesting because some of the denominations tell you don't put the baby Jesus in the creche until Christmas Eve because that's when he was born. Isn't that true? You ever seen that? The irony of it all is they have the 3 wise men there waiting for Jesus to arrive. We did the same thing for a couple of years. I said, you can't put baby Jesus in there until the wise men, until Christmas Eve. Even the little creche we have up here, we didn't put the baby Jesus in. But behold, the wise men were waiting for him. The wise men got there ahead of time. No, not really. It took them a long time to get there. We like to vision these wise men as kings. We sing this song, and we'll sing it today. It's in our hymnal. We 3 what? Kings of Orient are. We sing that song. We say that they're kings. We didn't know their names until St. Bede the Venerable gave us names for them. I mean, they were just 3 unknown kings, but then Venerable, or St. Bede, decided to name them. And so now they have names. But the question is, were they really kings? Were they really from the royal court? Were they really 3 kings? It's a question that we can't answer. We would assume that there were 3 of the Magi there who brought presents, right? Because what do we talk about? They gave him what? Gold, frankincense, and myrrh. So it's like each one gave him a present. I want to ask you a question. Did you get more than one present from somebody that you loved this Christmas? Were there 2 people that gave it to you, or 1? There was 1 person. So do we really know that there's 3? We don't. But what we do know is that they were Magi. We do know that they came from probably Persia and traveled to Jerusalem. The Magi were scholars. The Magi studied the astronomy. They studied the stars. They were astrologists. They looked for things in the present and things in the future. They were, in the old days, the Gene Dixons of the world who gave you your horoscope, and I don't know who does that now. But they're the ones who would use that astrology to try and predict and see what was happening. And on their studies, and in their studies, they saw this star that aligned. And they said something must have happened. Something that was very cosmic, that would create such a desire, such an interest, that they were willing to travel great distances, through great difficulties, through severe danger. Because along the way they would have encountered robbers and thieves who would have stolen what they had. The marauders of the day were out to seek these caravans and to steal from them. But something so intense must have spurred them to come and to travel that great distance. For this was something very unique, something very powerful that happened in the heavens. Something that was so cosmic that they could not come. The Magi were not of the faith. They were not Jewish. They worshipped other gods. In fact, they worshipped the heavens. They worshipped the stars. And this, in Jewish custom, was forbidden. In Deuteronomy 18, the verse goes like this. God is speaking to his people. When you come into the land that the Lord your God is giving you, you shall not learn to follow the abominable practices of those nations. Anyone who practices divination or tells futures or interprets omens or sorcerers or charmers or a medium or a wizard or a necromancer, for whoever does these things is an abomination to the Lord. These are not the people that the Jewish people would think would come and worship Jesus, the King of the Jews. These to them are outcasts. These to them they despised. They despised the Magi. In fact, a few years before Jesus was born, one of the rabbis had written, "If you learn from a Magi, you are worthy of death." Can you imagine when the Magi show up and look for the King of the Jews, what it must have caused? Can you imagine the dishevel that it would have caused? It was not expected, and yet they traveled this great distance because God had revealed to them in the heavens. It's not that we do divine worship of the stars, but God is the God of the heavens. He's the God of the earth. He's the one who controls nature. And He set this star there so that others could see. The prophet Isaiah reminds us that all kings, all nations shall come to worship the one that I send. Not just the Jewish people, not just them alone, but to all nations, all people shall be drawn to Him. And God is revealing who His Son is to the world. He's giving them that revelation. He's giving them that epiphany. An epiphany is not something that you gain the information and the knowledge from books, but it's something that's revealed to you. Not by books, not by studying, but something that is revealed to you supernaturally, and God is revealing the Son. This caravan travels great, great distances, and they come into Jerusalem, and it creates quite a stir. And they're asking, where is this King of the Jews? Where is He born? And it disturbs Herod. Now you have to understand, Herod is from a Jewish lineage. He's from the Idumeans. They come out of Esau's line. You remember Esau? Esau was the hairy man, right? And Jacob went in and put on the clothes, and his father gave him the birthright. Because Esau was so hungry, what did he have? He wanted a bowl of soup, right? Esau was more worried about the worldly things rather than the things of God. He was more worried about the things that he could have. And Herod follows his lineage. Herod would be called, because of his relationship with Mark Antony, would be called King of the Jews. Herod was so paranoid about his kingship that he actually had one of his wives and 2 sons killed for suspicion of treason. He was not going to relinquish control. He was not going to relinquish his kingdom. He was not going to relinquish his rule. And here comes these Magi. And they said, where is the King of the Jews? This disturbs Herod greatly. And he calls on the priests and he calls on the scribes. And he says, what is this? And they said, it is what prophecy had foretold. In Micah, in chapter 5, there is, and we read it in our gospel today. Micah chapter 5, verse 2, but you, O Bethlehem Epaphra, who are too little to be among the clans of Judah, for you shall come forth for me one who is the ruler of Israel, whose origin is from old, from ancient of days. From ancient of days. We read about that in Daniel 7, about the ancient of days. This is God fulfilling His prophecy. This is God fulfilling what He has told all of Israel, that He is sending His king. We find 3 different types of reactions to Jesus. We find different reactions to His birth. The Magi, as they came, they inquired. The prophets had told, and Jeremiah, or excuse me, not Jeremiah, but Herod had sent them to Bethlehem and said, find the king for me, tell him and worship him so that I can come and worship. And off they go. The star appears as they had seen in the beginning. It had not shone for all those years, but it reappeared for them to show them exactly. It's God's hand again working to reveal who His Son is. Herod is distraught. Herod wants to keep control. Herod is deceitful. And he is ready to do anything to keep his kingdom. I think today we have the same type of people before us. We have the same type of people in the world today. Herod was not going to worship the king. He was not going to worship God's Son. He was not going to worship God in that way. He rejected God. How many times have we seen people that we know reject God? We share who Christ is. We share God's grace. We share His love. We share His mercy. And yet they reject Him. I don't need God. I have my own spirituality. I can worship whatever I want to worship. They don't worship God. They reject Him. They go their own way. Why do I need God? They're like Herod. They are more worried about what the worldly things that they can have, the worldly things that they can possess, and they want to keep in control. They want to maintain that control of their life, because if they admit to God, then they might have to serve Him. But no. They want to keep to themselves their power, their control. Don't you know people like that in the world today? They may not be as bold as Herod, but they're like Herod. The other ones that I see are the priests and the scribes. They ignore what God has foretold. They ignore what God has said. They ignored what God has sent through the prophets to prophesy about what He's doing to redeem the world. They knew the Scriptures. When Herod asked them, didn't they come to him and said, "O Bethlehem of Epaphra"? This is what they ignored. We have people, and even in the church today, we have people that say, "Oh, going to church is good," but they ignore what God is saying to them. They ignore what God is calling them to. They ignore what He desires of us. They know the Scriptures, but they ignore them. It's not in rebellion because they still have a great love for God. You ever felt God tugging on your heart? Tugging on your heart to say, "Do this for me"? Tugging on your heart to be involved in this ministry? Tugging on your heart to bless somebody? Tugging on your heart to reach out to somebody who's hurting? But you ignore them. "Oh no, God, that's going to take too much of my time. That's going to take too much of this or that." We're like the priests and the scribes. We hear God's word, but we ignore it because it's an inconvenience to us. The third one is the Magi. They're Gentiles. They're not even of the faith. And yet they come to seek who this King of the Jews is. And when they see the child, when they come to the house, they kneel before Him, pay Him homage. They worship Him and give Him gifts. The Magi, the ones who are the most less desirable, are the ones who come to Christ. They come to know and worship Him. They come to give Him the honor that's due Him. I often think about what would happen if this place filled up with bikers. How many of you would be like, "What are they doing here?" You know, what if a group from the source, the homeless, came in and sat with us? How would we feel? Would we feel uncomfortable? Like, "Ooh." You can be a teenager. You can go, "Ooh." Would we feel uncomfortable like that? The ones that we cast out, the ones that we don't want to associate, would we be like that? But you see, God's message is to each and every one of them. God's message to us is the same today as it was then. God's message is to reveal Himself to those who ultimately will reject Him. God's message to us is to reveal Himself to those who love Him but ignore Him. And God's message is to those who we would never seek the undesirables to let them know about His grace, love, and mercy. God's message is to say that He sent His only Son. Why? To redeem St. Elizabeth. Did you get that? No. To redeem the world. For God so loved the world that what? He sent His only Son. This is the revelation that we have about the Epiphany. Whether the Magi were kings, whether they were from the king's court, or whether they were just good scholars, it doesn't matter. What it is about God's salvation to the world through His Son Jesus. And we have three choices: reject, ignore, or to receive and worship. Where's your heart today? How would you answer that question to yourself? Do I reject? Do I ignore? Or do I come and bow down and worship Him because He truly is the King of Kings, the Lord of Lords? Amen.